Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Dove Hair Fall Rescue with Nutri-Lock Active nourishes damaged hair and gives you visibly fuller hair. Can you see your fingers? Hardly. Now you see them. And now? You don't. Dove Hair Fall Rescue for hair that's visibly fuller.
ये मैं ये यूसुफ लंगोटिया यार सी मेरा लाहौर में हमारे घर के सामने एक बड़ा बाग था उस बाग का गेट बाबा आदम के जमाने रोज शाम को हमने वहाँ पतंगे उड़ानी और उसके बाद जाके यूसुफ की दुकान से
नमस्कार to say that.
Nah.
Can get everyone into trouble.
Yeah. So should we start?
I feel like a dog being leashed up. You want to sip?
Yeah.
Ready to go? Good evening, Jaipur. How are you this evening? If you've come for the intellectuals, I think they're right there. But if you've come for stories, for narrative, for how experience shapes two people and their work, then you're at the right place. And I'm very grateful for your attendance this evening in celebration of stories and of my very dear friend, Ekta. There's no one I'd rather be here this evening other than Ekta, one of the world's most successful television and film producers. Ekta is serious and fun and clever. She's got no affectations. She's had the same set of friends she's always had. And what I like about her most is that she's great fun to talk with. We met because Ekta had read The Last Song of Dusk and sent me a text message. We agreed to meet, and she came over and sat next to my mother and charmed her entirely. Ever since that day, a decade ago, we've followed each other's lives through SMS over a quick bite to eat, now and again, or at her place at Ganpati. I wanted to be here at Jaipur and only with Ekta because we're children of common experience. Both of us grew up in very privileged backgrounds in North Bombay. But if you took away that surface of privilege, then here were two confused kids, awkward in different ways, and therefore scorned by their peers. I was teased for being bookish and nerdish, and Ekta was trolled because she never really fit in. Regardless, we ended up doing things with our lives that fit with the public definition of success, which is to say that we became publicly successful, but more importantly, we fit with the private, personal, internal definition of success, which is to say that we became okay with who we are. That to me is our real triumph, which is to say we don't need to take on a facade. And now, increasingly, as my life opens up and I meet very successful, very famous people who secretly hate who they are, I'm very consoled by the fact that neither Ekta nor I are one of those. The awkwardness we felt about ourselves as teenagers thrust us into a more interior world, a private, imagining, dreaming world. When I'm talking about our childhood in the sense of an outsider that either of us felt, I'm doing so not to ask for any... Is everything okay? When I'm talking about our childhood in the sense of an outsider that either of us felt, I'm doing so not to ask for any sympathy points. Oh, Ekta, I wasn't expecting that already.
Yeah. Starters.
I'm doing so not to ask for sympathy points for suffering rich kids, or even to give this conversation some sort of an Oprah Winfrey Kleenex twist. Rather, I'm doing this to trace how we both came to love stories, books, narrative, and how we learned to invent stories in order to belong. And not necessarily belong to a defined world, but a world we first had to invent, negotiate, then define, and ultimately inhabit and own. Ekta Kapoor, welcome to Jaipur.
Hello, Jaipur.
Are you as nervous as I am?
Not at all. I'm not nervous.
Well,
Why
I'll
would I
make
be
you.
nervous at all? I'm supposed to bore you guys for 1 hour. I've been doing it for the last 20 years of my life. I'm great at boring people, especially when it comes for episodic times of 1 hour.
You know, I want to start by understanding the logistics of how you work, why you work, the influences in your work, and how you respond to those who respond to your work. So tell me the starting point for any soap opera or a film. What's the genesis?
I think before we go to how we start a soap, we should go to how I started with soaps. You see, like you said, escapism is necessary for any form of balance in life. The travesties of day-to-day life, the issues we deal with, we all need to escape into some world of our own. Especially if you have confusing issues with the world, if you're overweight, if no one asks you out for dates, you decide to create your own little winds and moons in your home, in your mind, and I decided that if I can do it for myself, why not do it through a medium like television for the rest of the country? Because if I have issues after being called the privileged, imagine those who have various other issues. Creating a world for me had become an escape route which helped me get balance in life. I have no problems with escapism. I think it's a very, very necessary in life. And television at that time was my form of escapism. I was a born couch potato. I spent most of my time sitting in my room watching television and making my own little dream world. So for me, any soap begins with if I can actually create a story or some characters that can be identifiable, that can be inspirational, that can weave a story around them or a world created around them that many, many people would want to escape to, will enjoy their pain, will enjoy the drama in their lives, will somewhere find in a very, very selfish way happiness in knowing that their lives are slightly better and somewhere probably entertain them. So for me, any story germinates from an idea where I feel this can give birth to a world or a character that people will want to follow.
So tell me about Kyuki, because the other day at breakfast you were telling me how that originated for you, and it was the thing that kind of defined the Indian television experience. Creating that for you, how did that start?
It started with, I think that everyone hears this at least once in their childhood, their mother, sister, friend saying, my mother-in-law is like a monster. I mean, all of us hear it sometime or the other. Of course, no one says it publicly, but everyone hears it some way or the other. When I used to hear this, I used to always question that how can everyone's mother-in-law be bad? How can everyone have
They have
an
a lot
issue?
of practice.
I know, yeah. Either they have a lot of practice, or is it a problem with the nature of the role that the person is playing and the relationship that is actually a social fractured social norm that has been thrust upon women. So you have men made to give whatever they have to their natural heir, that is their son. And women are meant to give their son, their home, to a girl who just walks into the house, who their prized possession son has fallen in love with, really. Or a girl is meant to accept a home as her own, treat the whole family as her own. Now this actually goes against the natural. So for me, anything that was going against the natural and yet was supposed to be socially accepted by a woman was a story ready to be told. So what I did was I created these characters with similar issues. So that's where the identification came, and then somewhere through some situation helped even giving small pointers to help adapt to that situation. So it was almost like infotainment of sorts, you know, entertainment with a lot of information. Okay, I can deal with this like that. Okay.
But you know, Ekta, you have many strong female characters in almost all of the work that you've made. What's the guiding impulse behind them? What's the guiding force behind creating these very strong women characters?
I think television is a medium of women. I mean, the home is where you go, and the home is ruled by the homemaker. The homemaker is the woman. And like films is a medium where I think you almost, it's more made. That's me, that's me.
Don't. Don't ignore that. Come here, give me your hand. So you'll be fine.
Okay, now you know what the populist is.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's not the band for the evening, I can assure you. JLF puts on a better show than this.
Okay, we got the drama of the day. The episode is a success.
Just go on. People are listening. Go on.
Okay, now we will turn this into a Jodha Akbar discussion if I don't carry on. So most of our stories germinate with this great love that people have for me. And the characters we see in real life. And I think the police has a lot of work to do. Where were we? I got a little lost. There was a deviation in the episode.
About strong female characters, but I should be talking to you about weak male characters in real life. But I don't need to.
Now you know what's my inspiration behind strong female characters? You women. Every day we see great women around who smartly sit quietly and do their job. So I mean, and my mother, of course.
No,
she became a very,
your mom.
yeah. That's background music. And so it starts with
Your mom.
my mom, who actually supported me. You know, we live in a very Punjabi conventional setup where women working was a question that came up a lot, you know. So I mean, you're allowed to work, but you have to stick to your social norms and come back home and their timings. I think if it wasn't for my mom telling my dad constantly that I want my daughter to stand on her own feet, I don't think I'd be sitting here. Because that's a war she had every day with my dad, and that's her home. She said, I have brought up these children with you, so I should have a say in what I should do with my children. And I want my daughter to work. Today, I think she actually took a distinctive, strong step at her home, which helped me create female characters who later on made a point in any issue or any social pressures that they had to face at home. And I think most of my characters have been born out of my mother. So yeah, there's a little bit of my mom in Tulsi, in Parvati. They may look like just plain homemakers, but they actually change the thought processes of so many women in India.
So, you know, Ekta, this is what we were talking about in the car, that sometimes people can come down quite strongly on you. For the kind of women characters you've created, some of them can be seen as regressive, some of them can be seen as demeaning to women. And I thought it was more important for me to ask that intelligently than to have that kind of imbecilic response that we've just had. So why don't you answer that as intelligently and as decently as we're talking right now?
My biggest criticism has been that my female characters are regressive. And to me, I think they are unidentifiable by the intellectual female viewer living in South Bombay, because she really doesn't know about the lives that women lead in small towns. To me, if a woman wears a sari or wears too much makeup when she's sleeping, or she wakes up with makeup, are not the reasons you demean her or look down on her thinking. I was creating female characters that had to be identified and aspired with. The cherry on the topic, the aspiration, the entertainment quotient was the makeup on her face when she slept. But most of the times we've picked up really, really strong issues. 10 years ago, we picked up marital rape. We picked up domestic violence. We've picked up a woman at 65. Ba wanted to start doing a job at 65. So as a matriarch, they allowed her to go at work. I mean, more than allowed, they actually supported her. She took ownership of her identity. So in a patriarchal society like ours, to have female characters who stand up and do small but thought-provoking steps towards what they would call empowerment may not be empowerment for a woman who doesn't have to battle these issues, you know, day in and day out. So for me, it's important that we brought out these topics, and I get millions, at that time I got a million letters from various women saying that I've gone through this. I've had women stop me in restaurants, call me and say
Gone
this is
through
my...
marital rape and responded
Yeah, I've gone
to
through
that.
this, and I actually raised my voice after seeing this episode. To me, that's way more important than the tag of regressive. If I'm effective, I'd rather be regressive and effective.
You know, one of the things about criticism, and I'm just bringing this in right now because of the recent circus display we just had, is that I want to tell you a story from my own life of how I've learned to...
Before that, I'd like to say, the more popular the person, the louder the criticism. So I actually quite enjoyed that little drama out there.
I just want to talk briefly about the criticism that I faced when I published the last song.
Yeah, I want to know that actually. You had quite a bit of criticism. Come on, Siddharth. Now you tell me how you faced it.
So it's a very simple thing that happened. There was a very senior, serious writer who took me on in a news magazine and wrote like a 3-page / burn, burn, let's put kerosene on this little boy and set him on fire kind of piece. And you know, when you just come out of the woodworks like I had, I didn't know what had happened, how to respond to it. And my mother sort of sat me down and just said, you know, just if people are going to say this, you're going to have to step back and let them be. Because there's a much larger will over here that's at play. Now, you know, it sounds really great on paper when somebody says this, but when somebody's actually saying something very nasty about you, that doesn't add up to very much. But here's what happened to that guy who did that. Do you know what happened to him, Ekta? He died. That was the response the universe had. That was the last piece of criticism he wrote, and he died. And actually it sounds ridiculous, but it freed me. It enabled me to say that none of this matters. If somebody can go out there and do all of this, you're going to chug right along, and there is a much greater will at play, and it is exactly to that I respond. In your case, unlike mine, Ekta, the process is collaborative. You have writers you work with. Do you sometimes feel you're taking control of another creative person's narrative or thought process?
I always believe that while the creative process needs some process, it has to germinate from one mind, and all the information has to go into one brain and then get formulated as one thought. Otherwise, it would be like too many cooks creating one dish. So for me, while
so tell me the actual process of how you do. How do you?
So I have writers. It depends. Like I said, there's some shows, some movies that I creatively ally, where I actually take a back seat, give my opinion, and then let one person take the decision. The shows that I handle, where my name is involved and my reputation is at stake, where I'll get criticized, I take on the creative mantle on my head. So like I'll rather have that clarity of thought before we start a project, be it a film, a television show, even a mobisode, that okay, you will take the onus, this is your baby, and I'm just like chaperoning it or like looking after it and probably helping you with it. But if this is my baby, then I take the decision, and that is not got anything to do with the position you have or the thought process you have. If it is your concept and you're very, very protective about it, I let that be, because if I want to make it, then I have to give you that space. But if it's my concept and it's my thought, then the same kind of respect has to be given to me.
You know, we were talking also about the role of intuition in all of this, and talking about how you learn to trust that inner voice at the age of 18, because at 19 you had the most successful soap you know, in the country. What allowed you to start trusting your voice at that age?
I think it started off with being a couch potato. Like I said, I escaped into a world which I considered a much better place to be in. And there were people who were bitchy, but they were entertaining and they were fun, and I was the heroine of my own story. And I was like, this is the world I want to create. As years have passed by, 19 years I've been in this industry, I think the experience I've had with constant interaction with my viewers has helped sharpen this instinct, because this is not just instinct now, it's laced with a lot of experience. So for me, while it was harder earlier to understand what my viewer wants, now it's easier. Plus, because you have a brand, you have a company, you attract so many young minds, you know, day in and day out, and they come in with fresh ideas. They make you insecure. They make you think again. So your constant process of thinking continues.
But you know, because you've established yourself so well, is there a part of you that becomes lazy, that says, okay, that's a formula that works and I want to stick to that? Is that something that happens sometimes?
I am never, I mean, it sounds really politically correct to say this, but I'm never motivated by success. So for me, if I was motivated by success, I would have given up working in the most successful years of mine. I am motivated by a story. There are stories that don't let you sleep, like The Dirty Picture. When I heard it for the first time, I couldn't sleep at night. This is the story I want to tell. So when you hear a story you want to tell and you're a creative person and you haven't been totally polluted by the successes and the failures of that work you create, then that makes you want to make it. Like if I've heard a character and I want to make his or her story, I mean that character doesn't let me get lazy. So I mean, if I'm lazy, I let myself be lazy, because then there's something not motivating me enough to write about it. I don't want to force enthusiasm into my creative process. The enthusiasm should come from the creative process.
But also that success can be a far more polluting force than failure, because at least failure is something that you can...
Yeah, success pollutes you a lot more than failure, that if you let it get to you. After some time,
you had a very bad patch in between where you were talking about like how things were not working out. How do you think you dealt with that when things were going south for you? What was the learning curve?
I think I went out for lots of dinners. I went out and met my friends. I decided to get away from it and then realized that the end is not in my hands. The success or failure of a show is not in my hands. I don't know if tomorrow what I create will be successful or not. I have to enjoy making it and then leave it and let the viewers like it or hate it and accept their decision with that much elan. And it's liberating to know that. At one point you know that you cannot create a hit show. You can create a show you want to make, and if it becomes a hit, so be it.
You know, one of the things we were talking about at dinner a couple of months ago with JB was about how the association between literature and cinema is diminishing. Right? For her, because her father-in-law, Dr. Harivansh Rai Bachchan, was a poet, and her own father, Jaya Bachchan's father, was also a writer. The original source, the fountainhead for a lot of cinema was literature. That's not any longer the case. What do you think informs the content that goes into films like The Dirty Picture?
I think while literature is facing its own challenges, there is non-fiction which is getting a strong foothold. I mean, while fiction is losing its foothold in literature, I think there are lots of biographies that find this space, like The Dirty Picture was inspired by a certain life, more than one, a certain type of lives that existed at a time of...
What are the type of lives that are interesting you right now that you'd actually like to film?
Yours. Those. But more than anything else, I think at this present moment, I haven't come across a biography that I'd want to make. But yeah, there are a lot of biographies, there are a lot of crime stories, crimes of passion that find place in literature, non-fiction, that can be made into a film or a TV show. For me, it's very important. I mean, if I had to create a book into a film or a TV show, that it has to have a strong story or a strong narrative or a really, really powerful character. If it's a world, which usually becomes almost the most interesting part of a book, then I would be very, very careful to take on that responsibility, because a world which is created by words has to be supported that strongly by the visual medium, because otherwise you'll be doing the book a big disservice.
Except that, you know, it could also be done in the way that The English Patient was made.
Yes, yes.
Where that, what the book that Michael Ondaatje wrote was very different from the film, and the film became almost like a homage as a compliment, and even the music and the climate that came with that music was something that added to one's appreciation of the book. So it wasn't a literal translation, but the love, the affection, and the genius of imagination with which The English Patient was filmed was a wonderful way of looking at how you can actually take existing material and dress it up in your own individual language. Is that?
Yeah, I want to say this now. I mean, I'm not saying this because you're sharing the stage with me, Sid, but your book, Last Song of Dusk, I mean, to me, the character of Nandini was brilliant because she's a character I'd like to see in a TV show or in a film because she actually, if you just read her life, her pointers
Because
would
she
be
was
most...
into interspecies sex?
Yeah, I was like, wow. But the way your words pulled you to believing her life,
Thank you.
I think that if a film or a TV show can do, then that would be a great book to make.
You know, the kind of engagement that you and I had with the book growing up as children, that it was somehow a place to vanish into. That's no longer the case in the larger scheme of things. I think that the nature of imagination and of concentration has diminished with the advent of the internet. Things have condensed. If the book as a form comes to fail, then the richness and interiority of imagination will also fail. What do you think can come to replace the book?
I don't know if anything can replace a book, you know, because...
Oh, thank you for saying that. That means a lot to me. I think it is irreplaceable.
But like I said, there might be a smaller audience. The attention span might constantly be decreased when mediums might lose their importance. But I always believe that the power of words and the power of a language will find its space in different mediums. So I really don't see that happening. I believe that while a book may not be read, it could be seen, it could be understood through another medium, and I think the richness
so when you
will
are
be captured
reading
here.
scripts,
Yeah.
what do you think is informing the language of the young script makers who are coming with you? Are they having that same richness, the same dexterity of imagination that was available to a generation ago of writers, because their imagination was influenced
I think
by
it's
books?
different. I think it's different. You get writers today with an imagination as rich, but the richness has a different texture. So you're not going to be getting writers today who come up with a language, you know. They don't dwell on things because they come from a generation that is impatient. But that impatience drives a totally new language. It's edgy, it's fast, it's incoherent at times, but at times it makes sense also. So I think the language today is what today's writers come up with. It might not be, it might create a certain amount of, what should I say, it might be raw, and it may not
But
have
it
the
is what it
polish
is, yeah.
that earlier writers had,
Right.
but it is a language what's now nonetheless, you know.
You know, to move this conversation to what we were thinking of talking about, the more personal aspect of your childhood and mine, growing up in Juhu, what was the most difficult aspect about growing up, and what do you think overcoming it allowed you to bring to your work?
Okay, so when I was growing up, I had, my peers were Karishma Kapoor, Abhishek Bachchan, Bobby Deol. And if you see all of them, they look like Greek gods and goddesses. And I was there looking like an offspring of, I don't know what. I mean, I didn't look like my dad or my mom. So here I was thinking that clearly God has some plan for me because I was overweight. I clearly didn't look my best. I used to sit at home and see television the whole day. And I was one person you would say would fit in, and yet I didn't fit in. So clearly I was a dichotomy of sorts, an oxymoron, star kid, not happening. So I was like, clearly no one's going to offer me a film to become an actress. What will be there for me in the future? And that's when I realized that God had a better plan for me because I had to make my own future. And I think most kids who are padded at a young age with futures drawn out for them don't go through the struggle or the experience to make their own futures. I think the adaptability to a situation is only given to you if you don't have everything working for you.
But tell me that moment when you decided that this is no longer the person I want to be. I don't want to be the fat, slobby kid, and I want to take charge of my life. What was the internal mechanism that changed?
I think I never ever thought I don't want to be that fat, slobby child. I first thought I'm okay about being the fat, slobby child.
Really? Why do you think that
okay.
was?
I think you should be okay with what you are.
Okay.
First step to be okay with what you are, the few things I want to change about myself.
Right.
And for me, weight loss came very late in life and has not really fully come also. But it came at a time when I was okay with myself. So I'm like, if I'm a fat sloppy kid, I definitely know what the fat sloppy kids want. I created a character like Ram Kapoor who was fat, and I was like, let people love the fat people. I mean, really, like, what's your problem with a few kilos I have on my body? I don't have to live up to your expectation of how I should look.
You know, one of the things that you and I both struggle with is this idea of serious. That somehow you're not just seen as serious because you entertain. You're not seen as serious because, you know, your female characters go to bed with their makeup on. I get that because I'm like seen as the pretty boy who does publishing. How do you respond to this perceptual idea of what is serious and what is not?
I'm seriously not interested in what they think. Because serious is not my favorite word. I rather, because my name starts with E, stick to the 3 words that come from E. Entertaining, engaging, effective. I rather be these 3 and then be serious. Because the serious ones are not taken seriously by even Lord Almighty. I mean, is our life serious? Not really. You were telling me something earlier.
You know, I was thinking about this when I was reading Jonathan Franzen, who was a speaker here. That's what I was telling you in the cab up. And his book, The Corrections. And it's a story of the Lambert family that's convening at Christmas time for a family dinner which really nobody wants to attend. The father's got Parkinson's, the mother's in excessive enthusiasm mode, and these kids are reluctantly coming for this Christmas dinner. And at a certain point of time, the father goes in the basement to escape all the tension that's happening above. And he falls down, I believe, if I recall right, and he's incontinent. And in that moment, as he's incontinent, lying in the basement, thinking about what's happening in one level above as his family is convening for this Christmas dinner, what's going through his head is that, you know, we grow up thinking life is a tragedy, but actually it's the greatest comedy that there is. It's farcical, it's ridiculous. So the idea that we might somehow take ourselves seriously, our books seriously, the work that we do seriously, or conversely, that we take somebody else who is not conforming to that definition as the opposite of serious, to my mind, imposes a kind of snobbery and imposes a kind of judgment for which I personally don't have any time.
I know, I think they should just stop taking themselves so seriously, because no one else is. I also would like to say something here, that something that germinated from what you just said. There was a line in Dirty Picture wherein Vidya Balan, who's Silk, every day someone would come to her and say that, have you read what people are writing about you? And she said, sorry, just show me if my picture is good or not. And one day someone, Naila, who wrote the worst things about her, told her that never ever read what people say about you. Because what people think about you is not your business. And there was a line, परवाह नहीं थी तो पंछी जैसी उड़ती थी. जरा क्या सोचा कि पर कट गए. The day you start thinking about how other people think of you, that's your end. Your flight, you have to look at your destination, you have to look at what challenges you have to face, your aspirations, your thinking, and go ahead. What other people think of you is not your business.
Ekta, if you were a young woman starting out in television all over again, what are the 3 lessons that you think you've learned based on the mistakes you've made that you would not repeat?
1, keep making mistakes.
Okay.
If you stop making mistakes, you're not learning anymore.
Right.
Second, I think you need to take your family with you wherever you go. If it comes to making them understand, so I think the families have to become much more supportive to young girls than they are really. I think we're seeing great changes, and I think girls are able to break the caste.
Talk a little about a study that came out on the basis of the work that you've put out in
Yes,
Chicago.
a few years ago, a Chicago-based research center did this research that cable television, from the time Tulsi and Parvati's came on, actually influenced the Indian homes in such a way that women started taking strong decisions in their homes, which they never did earlier. So while the rest of the world called our television regressive, somewhere it hit a chord. Through its entertainment lays some kind of, lessons, some kind of understanding that people learned from this television to actually go ahead and take a step. So it was not like some strange woman in some strange film that you've seen. It was a woman you saw every day in your house, and she had your issues. If she can go ahead and take a decision at home, if she can stand up against marital rape, if she can go and take a job, if she can tell her husband that this is what you are allowed to do and this is what I should be allowed to do, then why can't I?
Well, that's what I found most impressive when we spoke about this, the idea that even if a single person's life, even if a single woman somewhere rose up to the idea that I will not allow this to happen to me, it makes your entire life's work meaningful, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If somewhere somebody is watching television, escaping into that world that I've created, learning something from there, grappling with the travesties of real life through that, I think I've done what I wanted to do in the last 20 years of my life. That's
Ladies
it.
and gentlemen, Ekta Kapoor, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.